Hi, my name is Emily, and I am the self-proclaimed Reading Diva. I'm a reading specialist with over 20 years of experience in the field, and I'm here today to give you some assistance as you prepare for your RICA exam. Now, just a little bit of information. This particular video is meant to be an introduction. I'm in the process of putting together an online course that will then go through each domain, including the case study, for more specific examples and opportunities to practice and those sorts of things. So at the end of this video, if you would be so kind, I would love any feedback you have. It's my first video ever. I am jumping into the new century, so it's kind of exciting. All right, so to get started, I'm going to have to make a couple of window changes here. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see, we're going to move this over here. Shrink it on up so I don't look too wrinkly. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing I want you to be aware of is that all standardized tests are frustrating and scary, and they make us nervous, and test anxiety is very, very real. So please don't fret. The first thing you need to realize is that by preparing, you will be more at ease when you go in to take this test. So do as much as you can to get yourself prepared, but again, don't freak out. So there are a couple of things that we need to talk about here, and the first is that there are certain groups that have advantages and disadvantages when taking the RICA exam. So the first group, let's look at who has your advantage. And those of you that are actually liberal studies majors, your BAs in liberal studies or early teaching, if you're getting a multiple subject credential, and especially our primary teachers, you have the clear advantage. Your coursework is designed to get you to teach kids to read. Now, this isn't true for all teachers that have to take the RICA. In fact, if you are a teacher of special education, you have a clear disadvantage. Your coursework, at least as I'm familiar with in our universities here, is more geared toward the legalities of special education, the writing of IEPs, a lot of psych classes and things like this, but there's very little in the way of teaching kids to read. Now, if you are a secondary special ed teacher, you have a double whammy disadvantage. And this is because not even on your campus are people going to be concerned about teaching kids to read anymore. However, they expect a special ed teacher to be able to teach a student how to read, even though I know high school special ed teachers, you're more concerned about getting them to graduate and pass their courses. But this is one of the requirements. Now, if you yourself were an English language learner, English is your second language, you have a disadvantage. There's a very strong writing component to this exam, and a lot of those EL markers that tend to stick with you over the years, such as some grammatical errors, misuses of plurals, subject-verb agreements, those kinds of things will knock down the scores of your writing if you're not careful. So you need to be very aware and brush up where necessary. And finally, if you are a teacher who has come back to the field after a large gap in time, perhaps you started a family between your BA and your credential, then you as well will be at a disadvantage. So just be aware, the disadvantage isn't meant to bring you down at all, but it's meant to make you aware that you're going to have to work a little extra hard, harder than those that have somewhat of an advantage over you. So here's a couple of disclaimers that I need to cover. First of all, there's no magic formula to this test. I've seen different prep courses and things that, guarantee that you'll pass the first time. I disagree, and I think anybody who makes that claim is a charlatan. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you that you're going to have to work really hard because there is no formula, there is no guarantee. You have to use a lot of studying time, and you have to study from multiple sources, but especially if you are one of the groups that is at a disadvantage. You want to take extra time to study. Don't procrastinate. So also the quality of your writing matters. If writing is a struggle for you, if it does not come naturally or easily, you may need to spend some extra time just in brushing up your writing skills so that you can be ready for those 3 short answers in the case study, which count for a large portion of your RICA exam. So let's talk about the test structure a little bit. First of all, there are 5 domains that the RICA will cover, and these are basically your literacy sub-skills in most cases. The first one is planning and assessment. We need to know that teachers can look at assessment data, make instructional lessons that are best geared toward students' goals, and that can plan those lessons accordingly. There is a section on word analysis, and it goes into a lot of depths with phonics, phonemic awareness, and phonological awareness as well. Then there is the domain dealing with fluency. We will get more into that. Vocabulary and academic language, and finally comprehension. So these are those domains that the RICA will be covering in both the writing and the multiple choice. So again, test structure. There are 70 multiple choice questions that will cover all of the domains and competencies. So under each domain, there's a number of bullets that will list specific competencies that you need to be aware of. All of this is available online for free through, I believe, Pearson's website, and they have basically the criteria or the parameters of the RICA exam along with a free practice test that you can take, and I would highly recommend looking into that. There is one focused and educational problem for each domain, and those will be basically your short answers, anywhere from 75 words to 300 words. And then finally, the big kicker is the case study. Now, the case study is really pretty difficult, and you want to spend a lot of time here when you're practicing. So what your case study is going to do is going to give you the profile of a particular student. With that particular student, you will see a number of assessment data. It may include observational surveys, it may include running records, spelling inventories, writing samples, those kinds of things. And based on all of that data, what your job is to do is to basically target the teaching points for that student and then design a plan in order to help support the student with those necessary skills that they're lacking. Now, the RICA has a 4-hour time limit, and it goes by pretty fast. A passing score of 220 is what's going to get this off of your shoulders. Now, I've seen a lot of teachers come to me through my study sessions, and they've got scores of 216, 218, and it's very, very frustrating. So again, you want to really spend some time focusing on this, because you don't want to kind of right there by the hair of your chinny chin chin and not quite make it in. In the online course, I'll be going into specifics about what you can do to boost that score up, just so that you can get over that final hurdle. Your restroom breaks will come out of your 4 hours. I would suggest that if you are getting a little antsy, you're getting a little anxious, that you take a minute, go walk outside of the room, get a drink, use the restroom, just take a minute to breathe and collect yourself, just to calm yourself down, because sometimes that test anxiety can really get to some people. And then finally, the domains are not presented in order. They are all mixed up, so don't expect any sort of a particular format for that. Okay, so a couple suggestions for you that I want you to think about. And the first is take the multiple choice first. Some people I've heard said that they started with the case study because they were afraid of running out of time, and then what they did was they ran out of time for the multiple choice. I disagree. I think this is the wrong strategy to take. Take your multiple choice first. The reason is that as you're going through those questions, it's going to remind you of some of the vocabulary, the professional buzzwords in the field that you're going to want to use. There might be some really great instructional strategies that you could talk about in your own case study. So make sure you take the multiple choice first. Again, if there's a good instructional strategy, if you have the ability to, write it down or don't forget it. And then finally, just a quick little sidebar, questions dealing with English learners. Sometimes it's difficult, when you're given a certain profile of a student, an English learner versus a student on an IEP. These particular students, English learners, they're definitely going to have some deficits dealing with vocabulary, dealing with background knowledge and prior knowledge, academic vocabulary in particular. So keep that in mind as you're taking your test. So what do you need to know? Well, there's a lot. So again, in this video, I'm just going to kind of give you the overview, the nitty-gritty of these stages of learning to read. The online course will then go into each particular domain more specifically, so that you can then really get some of the detail. So first, let's look at reading and how it develops. I want you to think of reading development as a pyramid, and each of these foundational skills that start at the bottom lead up to the subsequent skill that gets a little more complex. So in this particular graphic here, you can see that we have a number of foundational skills followed by phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and comprehension. And you can see comprehension at the top because this is the end game. This is why we teach our kids to read. This is why we read, because we need to know, understand, gain knowledge or entertainment from what we're reading. So this is how you can envision it if you are more of a visual learner. So let's talk about some of the nitty-gritty. Well, to begin with, one of the first foundational skills is phonological awareness. And phonological awareness is one of those three confusing pieces that teachers get confused with all the time. You have phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics, and they're all different. So I want you to think of phonological awareness as an umbrella. And what it is this is the ability to understand that language is made up of sound. It's all about sound. So there are no letters involved. We can practice phonological awareness with our eyes closed. Never, ever, no letters with phonological awareness. So let me give you an example. If we're looking with kindergarten students and we are trying to help assist them with their phonological awareness, one of the big beginning skills that we can practice is counting the words in a sentence. For example, if I say, I like school, if a student can say, I like school, has 3 words in it, they recognize that there's a gap between those words, and that is language and how it's broken up. Now, if I go into phonemic awareness, this is more specific, and phonemic awareness is a raindrop, if you will, under your umbrella. So phonemic awareness deals with the smallest unit of sound, which is a phoneme. So where in phonological awareness we're looking at big gaps, for example, counting the words in sentences or breaking apart compound words, a phonemic awareness task might be something like counting all of the sounds in a word. So for example, if I wanted to know how many phonemes or sounds in the word cat, at. I have 3 phonemes in the word cat. Now, something to be aware of is that there are, for example, the letter X. The letter X has 2 phonemes. X. There's a K sound and an S sound. 2 phonemes, 1 letter. So if I were to break down the word fox, f, a, k, s, there's actually 4 phonemes in the word fox. Now, students who have mastered their phonemic awareness about by the end of first grade are going to be well on track for the next skill that they need to master. So as we look at the 2 skills, phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, these are both necessary sub-skills for students to master phonics. And phonics is necessary in order for students to be able to decode words and to spell words. So as I'm working on all of these skills, the phonics is going to allow us to become more advanced. We will work on phonics all the way through elementary school and in some cases even into middle school. We hope that it's mastered around 3rd grade, but it's not always the case. Now, one other thing about phonics is that it is necessary for students to decode and spell. And this is why we teach them this code. One thing to be aware of is that sight words are not phonetic. You cannot sound out a sight word. So if I were to ask a student to sound out a word was, they would say w-a-s. Was? I don't think so. So be aware that sight words are not phonetic. When I work with parents, this is a very strong reminder I usually give, because parents, although so well-intentioned, have one strategy when helping their kids learn to read, and that is sound it out. And sounding it out doesn't always work. One other thing about phonemic awareness and phonological awareness is we really focus on these two skills in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade, because they are red flags for dyslexia down the road if students don't have this. They are auditory processes, which are really, really important for learning to read. So fluency is the ability to read words at an appropriate pace and with expression. Now, fluency is also one of the most tested and assessed subskills, especially as a screening process, a screening assessment to find our students that are really struggling. And the reason is that fluency is directly related to comprehension. For example, if a student is reading very choppily, word by word, long pauses in between, they are not fluent. And if they are not fluent, all of that information being so far apart is going to be difficult to monitor for meaning. So we teach our students to read at an appropriate rate, an appropriate pace with expression, so that they are better able to monitor for meaning and comprehend the text that they're reading. It is not, when you see teachers or classes or intervention programs working on fluency, if they're timing their reading, charting their reading, this isn't about teaching kids to become speed readers. This is about teaching kids to become automatic. They need to build automaticity as they read. We don't want them to have to look at every single word and decode it, because that takes up too much of a cognitive load that is taken away from comprehending. That's the reason that we focus on it in our intervention programs. Now, finally, our comprehension. This is developed and strengthened, as we grow. It is the reason that we read. It's the be-all, end-all. It is the big deal, the whole end game. So all of the sub-skills that we've talked about are really there in place to help our students be more able to comprehend what they've read. Oftentimes I'll have teachers come to me with a question about a student and say, so-and-so just can't comprehend. And my question is always, why? It's not that a kid doesn't comprehend just to not comprehend. It's because they're lacking in a skill necessary to comprehend. And any of the skills that we talked about could be the one that is holding them back. Or it could be that they don't have comprehension strategies that are necessary. Are they rereading when needed? Are they questioning the text? Are they connecting? Are they monitoring for that meaning as they are reading? And oftentimes we find there's a gap somewhere and that we have to fill. Now, any of those variables can affect comprehension. So be aware, even if you are an upper elementary teacher, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, that I know comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary are usually the big teaching points there. But if you've got a 6th grader who's not comprehending, it's quite possible that they have a deficit with their phonics, and we have to go back and find what it is. So keep that in mind. Now, the final thought is about assessment, and this is actually in Domain 1. So assessment is the means by which we check our students' progress toward these reading goals. And there are various types of assessments, whether they are formative assessments, summative assessments. You're going to hear all of this in your studying. it is important that we assess our students so that we are instructing them in the skills that they need to become better at reading. This is also why we have to do what's called progress monitoring. It's another buzzword you're going to want to use. If we are instructing a student in a guided reading group, for example, and we let 16 weeks go by before we progress monitor that child, we don't know if our instruction has actually worked. And by the end of the semester or the end of the school year, it's too late. So every few weeks, once a month, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the need of your student, you need to progress monitor so you can see if there any adjustments in instruction need to be made. So a couple things to think about as we get ready to close here. Breathe and relax. You know, this test is going to be over eventually. The lucky ones, you'll pass it on the first time. The semi-lucky ones will pass it the second time, and then there are those that it's going to take a few more. And that's okay. It's part of the journey. I understand it. We want our teachers to be literacy experts because you're working with our students to teach them to read. It's the most important skill they can have in their lifetime, in my opinion. So also when you're writing, use the buzzwords from the field. This is important. You need to sound knowledgeable, that you understand literacy in general. And therefore, a good way to do this is to study the glossary of your test prep materials. Know the words, memorize the words. If you don't understand what a term is, talk to somebody in the field that can give you that information, or Google it. You'll get lots of information that way as well. Take the practice tests that come in your study books. There's a ton of them, and be aware that the format of the RICA, the test questions, the multiple choice, are quite lengthy and complicated, and so it does take some time. There are not very short little quick questions. They're lengthy, but take your practice test. Annotate the test as you're taking it, the practice test, so that you can go back and look at what your thinking process was for that particular question, and if you get it wrong, you could kind of try to backtrack what your thought process was. And then finally, in regards to the written responses, write out the practice responses from your books. Don't just walk it through in your mind. Don't just outline it. Write it out. You need to put yourself in that situation so that you know what it is that you're dealing with. RICA recommends giving yourself about an hour for the case study. I think that's probably a good idea because that involves not just looking at the writing piece, but it's also about analyzing the data that's given to you, and that can be somewhat lengthy as well. So those are just some tips to keep in mind. So if you're looking for more, I'm in the process of developing an online course. I'm hoping to have it up about mid-August before school starts, so that I can try to reach more teachers throughout California. I realized there was a strong need when I sent out my RICA session flyer at my university, and within 4 hours I had 9 people signed up. I was amazed, and from the feedback that I've had from my baby teachers that come to my workshops, there's a really big need out there. So I'm hoping that I can help fill that need, give you some feedback, give you some pointers and some tips to help you get through this. And for that, I'm asking for your feedback. Now, like I said before, this is my first video ever. I've never done it before. I have no idea if my voice is really annoying or if it's tolerable. So if you would please leave me some feedback below, I would appreciate it. It will help guide me, especially as I get ready for that online course. And really, is there a need for the online course? Are there those of you that are out there looking for more? And if not, you know, then clearly I'm going to do something else. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I think you can do it. You can do it. Keep the right positive frame of mind. Realize that you can do this. Seek out the assistance and advice where you can. Reach out to those mentor teachers that you have access to, your reading specialists on your campus. They are going to be really good resources for you. But above all else, don't give up. Your future students are counting on you, and it is worth it, speaking from experience. Okay. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm going to try to come back real quick to this, see if I can get there. There it is. Okay, sorry about that. I'm low techie. So I want to show you. Okay, so again, any comments, questions, things like that below would be really helpful. I hope you've enjoyed this. Have a wonderful day and good luck.